Hello, and welcome to day 2 of the NNLM Showcase Symposium. A couple of housekeeping rules. By attending any and all sessions of the symposium, you agree to abide by the NNLM Code of Conduct. Failure to do so may result in the removal from the symposium. There will be an evaluation at the end of the symposium on day 3 that will be made available in the VFairs lobby during the last session. We will also send an email to all registered attendees with the link to the evaluation, and an MLA CE code will be provided for you to claim CEs for each and all of the sessions you attend. For today's session, please feel free to utilize the chat feature to ask questions of our attendees during the session. Questions will be collected and asked at the end of the presentation, and any unanswered questions will be collected, and we will have them posted on our website. Our presenters today are Veronica Hoyo and Keith Herzog. Veronica is the Executive Director of the NNLM National Evaluation Center based at the Galter Health Sciences Library, Northwestern University. Her current work focuses on developing and executing evaluation and standardization plans that prioritize data-driven decision-making. She is passionate about disseminating knowledge to underrepresented populations and adapting survey research methods to become more inclusive and culturally responsive. Keith is the Associate Director of the NNLM National Evaluation.
Dana!
With nearly 20 years of experience in evaluation, project management, and program administration, Keith's current work is focused on inclusive and collaborative approaches to designing meaningful, feasible, and actionable evaluation plans that inform programmatic and strategic management efforts. Everyone, please welcome Veronica and Keith.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you to all the organizers for having us here. It's a pleasure for both Keith and I to be here. We'll just get started with everything fun about the evaluation. Before I move forward, would you all mind silencing your microphones so that we have a lot of really good and exciting content to share with you, and we need to go fast because we've prepared a lot. So next slide, please. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Here's a quick rundown of what material we will be covering with you today. First, we will define and understand what evaluation is and why it's important. Then we will move to the evaluation plan, what it is, where it comes from, and why do you need one. Keith will then guide you through the components of an evaluation plan. He will offer guidance in terms of how to think about each of these elements, and we will provide you with specific tips and lessons that we have learned in the past when creating our own evaluation plans. And we will conclude with a few key takeaways and a question and answer session. Like Tony correctly said, I think because of the nature of this meeting, we're worried that we will not have a lot of time to cover all your questions at the end of the session. So if you could please enter them in the chat, we will make sure we respond to all of them, and we'll provide answers as a separate file. So please use it liberally and freely and as often as you would like to. We'll be making sure to read each and every one of them. A quick word about rules of engagement for this meeting. As Tony correctly said, we value and cherish and abide by the NNLM values and code of conduct. NEC in particular is committed throughout this presentation to grow together, practice empathy, listen to learn, exercise patience, and we value all voices. So thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us have a respectful engagement and an interactive and fun engagement around the topic of evaluation. And I'll start with the end as well. You see in this purple box in front of you the key single most important take-home point for today. There is no one-size-fits-all well-crafted evaluation plan. As much as we would love to be able to offer you a recipe that would work always and forever, the reality is evaluation is context dependent. So what we will do here with you today is we will offer you guidelines, we'll share some standards, we'll tell you tips and hints of things that have been useful to us in the past and lessons that we've learned. And rest assured, we will share lots of materials with you. At the end, you'll have references, you'll have stuff to take. We will have handouts. Everything will be shared with the organizers so you can have access to it. But I do want to stress that evaluation plans take time and effort. So sadly, we cannot offer you a ready-to-go recipe that will always work, but we can help you think for the right prompts, for the right questions that will guide you to create well-crafted evaluation plans. So let's start with a little game to know you a little bit better. We are going to play with a game-based learning app that's called Kahoot. And oh, sorry, can I? Yes, I'll share. Go to the, hang on, let me share my screen. So what you need to do if you are familiar with Kahoot, you can see it now. Oh, sorry, let me remove this ribbon from here. Yes, can you see? So go into the www.kahoot.it, enter this PIN number that you see here. If you have the Kahoot app in your phone, obviously you can also use it. So go to this place. Do not use your name. Do not use your create an alter ego, use initials, use something that is not super readily identifiable. And we're just going to have a couple of questions for you too. Thank you. Thank you, alter ego. That's exactly what needs to be done. So just go again to this browser here, www.kahoot.it. Use the app, enter this PIN number 5907384. Don't use your real name, use your alter ego, your superhero identity, numbers, love it. All of this, no name, perfect. And I'm just looking at the numbers we have. I'm going to wait a little bit more. We just have a couple of questions. The point of this little game-based learning activity is that we want to hear where are you coming from in terms of evaluation. And so we want to just pick your brains for a little bit. I'll give it one more minute and then I'll start. Okay, and if you're still joining, don't worry about it. You will catch up with us. So let me just start hitting start. So when you hear evaluation, what's the first word or phrase that comes to mind? When you hear the word evaluation, what's the first word or phrase that comes to mind? You have, oh, a lot of seconds, 110 seconds. When you hear evaluation, what's the first word that comes to mind? When you hear evaluation, what's the first word or phrase that comes to mind? And don't overthink it. It's really whatever first comes to mind. There's no right or wrong answers. We just want to get the feel of what notions or ideas this word conveys to you. Awesome. Thank you. We see that this is just waiting. We still have a little bit of time. Great. Thank you for sharing. So again, 60 seconds it's still on. When you hear evaluation, what's the first word or phrase that comes to mind? So I see that you're almost there. 50 seconds, 47 seconds. Evaluation. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How is it? Is it a neutral thing? Do you have no idea? Is it the first time you've ever heard it? Have you heard it every day for the last week? What kind of connection you have with this word? And we're almost done. It's 25 seconds about now. Almost ready. Thank you for bearing with us for a second. 17, almost 15. Yay. Okay. I don't want to hit skip because I don't know what happened. So 2 seconds, 1 second. Thank you. Now the app is sorting the ideas for us and trying to keep. We will not do voting. I just want to see. Oh, wow, exactly what I didn't want to happen. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry, I messed up the previous question. So I'll go back in a second and I'll look at your answers. But have you ever contributed or have you ever contributed or led the evaluation of a project or a program? Yes or no? Have you ever contributed or led the evaluation of a project or a program? And I will not touch my mouse, I promise. Most people, yes. A few people, no. Thank you. I'll go back in a second to the question that I skipped. Let me finish this. Have you developed an evaluation plan in the past? Yes or no? Have you developed an evaluation plan in the past? Yes or no? No for is red, yes is blue. Have you ever developed? Okay, we have more no's. That's awesome. This is perfect. We have a couple of yeses, but not everyone has done it. Thank you. And let me try to see. 1 second. Stop 1 second for a second. Trying to see if I can get quickly the report to show you what you said at the beginning. Sorry about that. Oh, I was bad running from it by me. 1 second, let me see if I can get this. Okay, so I will not bother with this right now because I don't know exactly where to find the report. Sorry about that. That was my bad. Apologies. I'll go ahead and move to our next section. I will again, however, take a look at what you said. So again, apologies. So I am assuming that many of you stated what is the commonplace ideas of evaluation. People always think about assessment, test. Often it gets it has a layer of potentially negative feelings around them. People are afraid of evaluation. People don't know exactly what to think about evaluation, why it matters. And what I wanted to show you, that's why we were doing these activities. I wanted to see that there are many different ways, and at times they're often contradictory ways of thinking about evaluation. So what we wanted to show you is a common denominator of how we should all start, of how the way that NEC and several federal agencies like to think about evaluation. And what you see here in the screen is a definition that comes to us by a federal agency that has a very strong and robust program evaluation core, the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. And their definition of evaluation is, it's a systematic method for collecting, analyzing, and using data to examine the effectiveness and efficiency of programs, and just as importantly, to contribute to continuous program improvement. I am highlighting in different ways the key components of this definition. A systematic method, what do we mean by that? By that, we mean that it's a rigorous science-based approach to investigate or inquire or think about processes. It's often deemed objective. So it's an objective process for collecting, which means gathering, analyzing, which is processing, which is assessing to a certain extent, which is engaging and making the necessary connections and finding the logic of certain things. And what are those things? Data. Data is information, right? And what do we do all this objective, rigorous inquiry about information that we want to process and analyze? Well, we do it to determine the effectiveness. That means how things work. Do they work? Why do they work? And once we have figured that out, are they producing the results we intended for them to produce? We also care about the efficiency. For whom is it working best? How can it get to work better? How can it get to be faster? How can it get to be more accurate about what we're trying to do? So to summarize it all up, evaluation is a rigorous objective assessment of a planned, ongoing, or completed, what we sometimes call intervention. Use intervention, program, initiative, activity as synonyms for the purpose of this presentation. And what we do with this rigorous objective assessment of a planned activity that is still ongoing or completed is that we focus in understanding all aspects of it, from its design to its implementation to its final results, right? Evaluation wants to understand how effective, how efficient, and how impactful and sustainable a program or an action or an activity is. You will hear me later say that what we're doing in evaluation is besides doing an objective analysis and an objective approach to collecting the data, we are passing judgment at the end of it. We're trying to determine the worth, the merit, or the significance of a given intervention. And this is important. It's a point that I'll come back in a little bit. Next slide, please. So we have one of the first suggestions that we have for you is to try to come up always with what we are saying, and it's what we're calling an evaluation mindset. A very well-known evaluator, Michael Patton, and you will get the reference to Michael Patton's work in one of his books, utilization-based, utilization-focused evaluation. He said, evaluation is really about answering three simple questions. What, so what, now what? And I agree that this is a very good way to think that that's what we're calling it an evaluation mindset. I think these three questions trigger the right prompts in someone's mind to think in an evaluative sense for an evaluation plan and for carrying this type of activities. So the what is the first stage, right? It's the planning stage. This is where you get the story, where you're looking for the context, where you're looking to understand what you're doing, who is involved in what you're doing, what challenges or problems have already arisen, could arisen, or you're certain that will arise. This is, in a sense, a data collection stage with an emphasis on qualitative data collection, right? From that in the original stage where you're planning and when you're understanding the context, where you're getting the meat of the intervention, you move into a so what stage. And this is where the analysis part starts, right? This is where you're examining, analyzing. You're also gathering data. So you will hear me say data in all three stages because there's different types of data that you're gathering, right? You always need data to make any decision, to learn, to do anything that is evaluation related. You're always going to be driven by information and the data that you're collecting. So in the so what stage, in the analysis stage, we're figuring out what assumptions did we make when we designed the intervention? Who is being affected by our actions in our program? How are they being affected? What do these effects imply in the longer run? That's the analysis stage, right? And then we move into the now what section. In the now what section, you're definitely going for the decision-making stage. Go back and think about the definition that I quoted from the CDC. The CDC said towards the end of the definition, it's all about continuous improvement. Yes, exactly. So this is the part where the know what becomes really, really important. This is the part where you're making the value judgments that I was telling you at the beginning. This is where you figure out what the next steps need to be taken, where decisions need to be happening, what went wrong, what didn't go right, how results will be used, who needs to hear about them. So the third stage also has a big component on the dissemination part of it. Next slide, please. So we have now covered what is evaluation. Now let's move on to the why evaluation is important. And I've already also said a little bit. I think that evaluation is important for two reasons. Evaluation allows us to learn. Always. Learning is the first purpose of evaluation. And the second purpose is accountability through decision-making. Evaluation is a means through which we define an action, program, initiative, and we define its merit, its worth, and its significance. That's what pushes us in a different realm. So it starts being objective, but at the end, you're making a value judgment based on the data that you collected and gathered about that particular intervention. So why is evaluation important for you? If you're leading or the organizer of an activity or an action or an initiative, it means probably that it's an evaluation is important because it's the means to obtain funds. Its evaluation components are mandatory components for most funding agencies. I have yet to see one that doesn't require an evaluation. So first of all, that's a means to obtain funding for your program. For the program itself, it tells you what needs to be done and how you are doing in each stage and step of the process, right? It helps you discriminate or distinguish between relevant and irrelevant information. It makes you, it allows you to correct course so that you're not wasteful, right, of time and resources. And it allows you to best identify methods and strategies to do what's needed, from gathering better information to expanding the reach of an already successful program. For your community, having an evaluation means that you understand and are trying to address their needs, that you're able to share information and resources. And the ultimate goal, I think, is to improve lives. So let's move now to the evaluation plan. What is an evaluation plan? Again, think that we're applying through these slides. You also see that we're applying the evaluation mindset. What, now what, so what, now what. So what is an evaluation plan? A written document that describes how will you monitor and evaluate your program, as well as how you intend to use evaluation results for program improvement and decision making. You see that there's a connecting thread between all of the definitions from the CDC and the slides that we're presenting you here, right? We're basically saying the same thing in many different synonyms. So we've established why it's important. We know what now the CDC says it's an evaluation plan, but to us, the evaluation plan is the simplest tool in the evaluator toolkit. It really constitutes a roadmap for inquiry. So next slide, please. As a roadmap, the evaluation plan becomes your North Star. It sets the stage for you as lead of an activity or an initiative or a program to connect all the components of your evaluation. It serves as a tracking tool. It keeps you focused and prevents scope creep. Scope creep is just program management lingo for saying that the project keeps growing and growing and adding stuff and becoming more and more complex and less achievable. You never want scope creep, right? You want to be focused, you want to be self-contained, and you want to be able to achieve whatever you're setting. This is why an evaluation plan is so important. It's also, as a roadmap, it fosters collaboration and communication. Remember, I told you it's a connector of components. So it's telling you, again, who is involved in the process and what power dynamics are happening between them, how things are implemented with the people that you have to implement them with. So it also increases transparency about your overall activity, and a well-crafted evaluation plan, and this is where the tip or the guidelines come, would also have a component about sustainability. Funding agencies are looking to see that you have a plan that is so well reasoned and thought about that you are trying to also make it sustainable, right? That it will not be a project that if it runs into the an unexpected, as it will often happen, an unexpected event, that it will come completely crumbling down. You need to think about sustainability and about ways to dealing with external factors that will impact anything that you do. So I do want to emphasize that a strong, well-crafted evaluation plan connects, makes sure that the objective is matched to a target, it's related to an output, and has a clear indicator of success. So again, tracking tool, roadmap, two important ideas when it comes to evaluation plan. And finally, I just want to tell you, let's carry on. Next slide, please. Let's carry on with the analogy of the evaluation plan as a roadmap. So before you even take a trip, what kind of choices do you normally make? You may usually decide 1, where you're traveling, 2, the means of transportation, 3, your destination, 4, your travel companions, 5, the luggage and the type of clothes that you will be able to wear or that you want to wear, right? Just like you're doing that with a traveling plan, you need to have a plan before you start writing your evaluation plan. So there is a lot of pre-planning happening. So this is where the evaluation plan comes from. And where can you get that? Again, use your evaluation mindset. Think about the what, the so what, and the now what. Go for the story, identify the components for the analysis and for the decision making. And I will now cede the floor to Keith, who will guide you through the rest.
Great, thanks so much, Veronica, and thanks everyone again for joining today's session. Very much appreciate your time. So building upon the concepts that Veronica just shared, let's now take a deeper dive into the 7 essential components of an evaluation plan that you see listed here on the screen. And building upon what Veronica mentioned around the evaluation mindset, you can see that the sections are grouped and color-coded by the evaluation mindsets of what, so what, and now what. And as you can see on the screen, under what, in terms of sections of your evaluation plan, you have the overview and program objectives, the purpose of the evaluation, as well as timeline and work plan. Under so what, you see evaluation questions, a description of data collection approaches and data analysis plan. And then lastly, under now what, you have the all-important dissemination plan. Why do we do evaluation? We don't just conduct a survey to conduct a survey. We conduct a survey, we want to learn, and we want to share those learnings with others. And over the next few slides, we'll discuss for each of the sections, the guiding questions, the specific components of the section, as well as tips and recommendations that we'd like to share with you as you're thinking through each of those 7 sections. But before I do, I want to call your attention to the 3 resources noted at the bottom of the slide from the Centers for Disease Control, from the National Institutes of Health, AHRQ, and also from the University of Kansas. These 3 evidence-based resources provide additional guidance on approaches to developing an evaluation plan. And I also want to reiterate a point that Veronica made at the start of the presentation. There's no one-size-fits-all evaluation plan, given that evaluation is highly context-dependent. However, what we hope is that the following slides, as we talk through the guiding questions, the specific components, and the tips for each section, will give you a good sense of what should be covered in a comprehensive evaluation plan. So let's start first with the overview and program objectives. Within this section of your evaluation plan, you want to think about and seek to answer 4 key questions. What program are you evaluating? When did the program take place? Who is on your evaluation team? And what specifically do you want participants to learn or gain or otherwise take away from your program? So this section is highly descriptive. And thinking about this section components, as we've included in the evaluation plan template developed as a resource for everyone today, you'll see a screenshot of that later on. This section includes space for information about the program you're evaluating, as I mentioned, such as the program title and the dates. But it also includes space to identify your team of collaborators available to contribute to the evaluation process, including the program organizers, the evaluation team, and even other subject matter experts. And then lastly, in this section, you want to list your program objectives and learning objectives. That is what the program organizers want participants to learn, gain, or, as I said, otherwise take away from their participation in the program. These program objectives, which we all know and love, are frequently overlooked in evaluation plan frameworks. However, they are truly essential, as they are the North Star throughout the evaluation process, ensuring that you stay on the right path through this roadmap. And lastly, in many cases, it may also be useful to include a formal logic model in this section, outlining the inputs, the outputs, the outcomes, and also the impact measures for the program you are evaluating. So again, the overview and program objectives really sets the stage and is the foundation for your evaluation plan. So now thinking about tips, we want to share 2 tips as you're working on your overview and program objectives section of your plan. So first, whether your team is large or small, evaluation, we would argue, is truly at its best when it's inclusive and collaborative. So when identifying your team members, as you can see in the middle block on the screen, whenever possible, bring together multiple perspectives to or at the evaluation table. And secondly, thinking about those all-important program objectives. You'll hear me talk about these multiple times. Consider using the SMART objectives framework to develop focused, meaningful, and actionable objectives that will both be useful to the program organizers in keeping a focused presentation or program or initiative, will be insightful for the participants to understand what the purpose is of the activity they're engaged in, and will be critically useful throughout the evaluation plan. So moving now to the purpose of the evaluation section of your plan. Here you need to consider and answer 3 very highly related questions. So the first, what are you hoping to learn from the evaluation? Then who will receive the evaluation data you collect or the findings from your evaluation? And then how will the findings be used for decision making? This section really gets at the motivation for the evaluation. So in the first section, we describe the program and the objectives. This is getting at the deeper motivation and purpose of the evaluation. So in terms of section components, start first with your goals for the evaluation. What does that mean? Think about what do you need to learn or understand from the evaluation, as well as what data are needed to inform programmatic and strategic decision-making and to convey the impact or the success of the program to your own team, to your funder, and others. Next, identify the audiences that will want to receive the findings from your evaluation, always keeping audience in mind, including in many cases your funder, perhaps the NNLM, for example, the program organizers, but also community partners and even program participants, thinking about them as potential audiences for evaluation findings. Then think about how your evaluation findings may be used by one or more of these audiences to inform decisions and to more deeply understand the impact of the program. And importantly, consider if your audiences may have both overlapping but also varying needs. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in one of the future sections. In terms of tips for this section of your evaluation plan, we would suggest that you keep 3 points front of mind. So first, whether you're thinking about your evaluation goals, audiences, or role for evaluation findings and decision-making, think about the utility of this work. That is, how will you and others use your evaluation findings to measure success, to understand impact, and make evidence-based decisions? That should be connected to your evaluation goals. Second, always keep in mind, as I noted a moment ago, the needs of your different audiences. So for example, does your funder have specific expectations or guidance for sharing your evaluation findings in an interim or final report? And third, make sure that you keep returning, I promised I would say this again, to your program objectives, your North Star. This is important to do throughout the process of developing an evaluation plan to ensure strong alignment between your objectives and the purpose of your evaluation. And in truth, it's incredibly useful to return to those program objectives throughout the entire evaluation process that is described in the plan itself. So now thinking about the timeline and the work plan. This is the third section of the plan under the what evaluation mindset. We all know that time is precious and is often in short supply. So including a timeline and a work plan, even if it's short and to the point, can be enormously helpful in keeping your evaluation efforts on track and maintaining your own sanity, which is always great. And importantly, it is also helpful with supporting strong communication with your team, as well as your audiences identified in the previous section. So ensuring that clear, consistent communication. The timeline and work plan can also be helpful with supporting accountability for tasks and producing deliverables. So in this section of your evaluation plan, you want to answer 2 questions. The first is, what is the timeline for your program and evaluation work? Then secondly, who is responsible for each task or deliverable, particularly if you happen to be working with a multi-person team? So in terms of the evaluation plan template that we created to accompany today's presentation, this section, the timeline and the work plan, is organized as a table with a brief description of the task as a column, the name of the team member responsible for the task, as well as the start and due dates. Certainly could make sense to add additional columns, including the status of the task, but we offer this 4-column table really as a starting point for you to adapt and edit as needed. And the tasks listed in your timeline and work plan might include, for example, when the program takes place, a deadline for developing your survey or interview questions, as well as when you expect to open or close your survey, or finalize a draft of your evaluation findings, and subsequently when you plan to review findings with key audiences, or when the final report is due to your funder. So the particular tasks or deliverables may vary by evaluation plan, but the purpose here is to utilize the plan to help outline what needs to happen and when it needs to happen. And of course, as I noted, the specific tasks or deliverables will vary depending also on the design and the complexity of your specific evaluation. So when drafting the timeline and work plan, we suggest that you start early. Once you have those all-important program objectives developed, you have what you need to start developing your evaluation plan. So start early whenever you can. Second, be kind to yourself and your team. Build an ample time for the more work-intensive steps, typically, in the evaluation process, such as developing your survey or your interview questions, analyzing your data, and drafting one, or in some cases, perhaps multiple summary reports. Use your timeline to help you under-promise and over-deliver. And of course, keep in mind any reporting deadlines from your funder. Then whether you are new to evaluation or have years of experience behind you, evaluation is an enjoyable, fulfilling, and educational, and dare I say, inspiring endeavor. And a clear timeline will help you stay on track and maximize the fun, while also ensuring excellence throughout the process. Third, if you have multiple team members contributing to the evaluation, be sure to assign responsibility for each task to a member of the team. This will keep everyone on the same page and aware of the team's progress. Lastly, one final bonus tip: don't forget to revisit your timeline throughout the evaluation process and adapt when needed in response to important changes on the ground or external factors. So now let's talk about the nitty-gritty of evaluation, the questions that you intend to ask your participants, which we might also call your respondents. So whether you are planning to collect data using a survey, an interview, focus group, or by querying an existing database, and we'll talk about those in just a moment, the questions you ask are at the heart of your evaluation plan, much like your North Star, those program objectives. So when you're writing the evaluation section of your plan, think about these guiding questions. What questions are you asking program participants? And how are these questions directly tied to the program objectives? So as you can see in the second slide in this section, you might include a simple bullet point list of the questions you intend to ask. These questions may cover one or more domains, ranging from satisfaction to changes in attitude and beliefs, all the way through to impact. And of course, your particular evaluation might cover other domains not represented in this particular list. So when developing your evaluation, first and foremost, don't feel the need to recreate the wheel in all instances. There are countless resources available on the web and in published articles with vetted questions, with scales, and other useful tools. So leverage those. We encourage you to find those reputable sources and be guided and inspired by those standardized tools. Also, not to sound like a broken record, but ensure that your evaluation questions are aligned with those all-important program objectives for the reasons we've touched on. And so importantly, remember to value your respondents' time as you're developing your evaluation questions. And one key way to value their time as you're developing this plan is to prioritize which questions you do and do not ask, and how you go about asking the questions. So focus on questions that are mission critical and are needed to inform decision-making, understand success, and convey impact to key audiences. So we're making our way through. A moment ago, I promised that we'd talk a little bit more about how you go about collecting the data. Do you use a survey, an interview, a focus group, existing data, and so on? And this is covered, even if very briefly, in the data collection approaches section of your plan. And let these two questions that you can see on the screen guide you when writing this section. How will you collect the data from participants, and how many times will you engage with them? So in many cases, this section may be quite brief. You want to describe how you plan to collect the data and also indicate how many times you plan to collect data from program participants, as I noted. So for example, a popular and often quite useful and effective approach is to conduct a single survey immediately following the program. And in fact, as Tony noted, we are using this very approach for the NNLM showcase. You will receive a brief survey tomorrow at the conclusion of the showcase. In other settings, you may be asking questions that are best answered in a one-on-one interview or a small focus group. As well as in other cases, you may want to do an immediate follow-up survey and then survey participants again 3 or 6 months later to measure or understand the longer-term impact of the program on participants. So it varies. But again, a brief description of how you're looking to collect data. Some tips. First, if you are planning to collect data using a survey, consider using free or low-cost survey tools, including, for example, SurveyMonkey, RedCap, but also Google Forms and Microsoft Forms. Second, remember to ask your funder about any human subjects protections requirements. So thinking about the Institutional Review Board. And for example, does your funder need you to use a survey or set of questions, interview questions that have been reviewed by an Institutional Review Board? And third, again, remember to value respondents' time. Select a survey tool that has an interface that's easy to navigate, and think about whether your respondents are most likely to answer your survey on a computer, their phone, or on paper. And also think about, as you decide which approach you're using, and think about respondents' time, recognize that many surveys may take only a few minutes, or perhaps 5 to 10, whereas interviews often require 15 to 30 minutes or even an hour. So keep the value of your respondents' time in mind as you draft this section. So getting close. So we only have 2 more sections to discuss. In your data analysis plan, answer this one question. How will you analyze the data you collected in a manner that is clear, achievable, and actionable? So more specifically, describe the techniques or calculations that will be used to understand what the data are telling you, whether that's averages, counts, frequencies, or summarizing open-ended or written short answer responses from your respondents. So keep those in mind and describe the techniques or calculations so that you're prepared for when the survey closes or the interviews are complete to be able to conduct those analyses. And also in this section, you might also describe the types of charts and figures that you intend to create. So jumping to tips just in the interest of time. First, as we touched on earlier, be sure to consider the needs of each audience that will receive your evaluation findings. Are your audiences comfortable with receiving a table with averages and percentages by item, or is it more appropriate to write a few paragraphs that convey what the data are telling you? Then consider what each audience needs to understand the findings and, when necessary, to make decisions based on them. Then secondly, consider using Microsoft Excel. It's an incredibly powerful tool, as I'm sure many of you know, and can be useful with creating charts and graphs. And importantly, there are many resources available on the web, including YouTube and TikTok, that provide step-by-step guidance for preparing many different types of figures. And third, consider whether or not it's appropriate to review draft findings with particular individuals or some of the audiences you identified in earlier sections to get their help with interpreting the findings. Again, evaluation is often at its best when it's an inclusive team sport. So now the final section of your evaluation plan is the dissemination plan. So this section, as I noted earlier, is often overlooked, but is arguably the most important part of the evaluation process. That is sharing your evaluation findings with others. And then this section, you want to answer a single question, but an important one. How will findings from your evaluation be shared with key actors and used for programmatic and strategic decision-making? In this section, include a brief description of the audiences who will receive the findings. These can be pulled from section 2, the purpose of the evaluation. And then for each of these audiences, describe what type of summary you will provide. Is it a comprehensive report? Is it a brief executive summary? Or perhaps an infographic with attractive data visualizations? Then how will you provide it? Through email, in a meeting, etc. And what is the deadline for providing it? Then consider if, thinking about tips, if one type of report is appropriate and useful for all of your audiences, or if some audiences might have unique needs. So for example, some audiences may only want a brief executive summary, whereas others might prefer the full report, or as I noted, a one-page infographic. So, and with that, we've covered all 7 sections of the comprehensive evaluation plan. We've covered a lot very quickly over the past few slides, but remember a couple of things. The evaluation plan is your roadmap throughout the evaluation process. And just as important, it does not need to be terribly long in many cases. For example, in many instances, it may be a couple or a few pages. And now, with that said, let's wrap this up with just a few overarching points that I'll run through very quickly. So in summary, pulling from what we've already discussed, let's talk about the characteristics of an effective evaluation plan. As we've described, effective evaluation plans are written and complete. They're developed inclusively with your team. If you are working with multiple individuals, they're saved in a central location so that they're accessible to everyone to reference throughout the evaluation process. They utilize available resources and standards like scales or items, and they're revisited throughout the evaluation lifecycle and adapted when necessary to reflect significant programmatic changes. But also think about the characteristics of an achievable or feasible evaluation. So to ensure that your evaluation plan is achievable or feasible, keep in mind your timeline. How much time do you have from development or concept all the way through to providing a report? What is your budget? What are your available tools and resources? What potential hurdles, challenges might you envision? And what are possible solutions? Think about team members' experience. Does anyone on your team have prior experience with developing a survey or analyzing the data? And importantly, keep in mind your own bandwidth, your team's bandwidth, but also the bandwidth of your program participants who are also your respondents. And then lastly, in terms of a key takeaway, as we've talked about, an evaluation plan is intended to be your roadmap. So always keep in mind that your evaluation goals and measures are aligned with your program objectives. Then, importantly, does your funder have specific requirements? That's an important question to answer and keep in mind early on and throughout. And then, going back to the prior slide, is your plan achievable within the available timeline? So that was a quick review. Again, we'll post the slides and other resources of a comprehensive evaluation plan. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Veronica.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat. Feel free to enter them, raise your hands. I think we're Tony, correct me, but I don't know how much more time we have left. But we have created Keith, can you show the next slide? We have created some outputs for you to take with you. So there's some handouts that will make sure that to share with the organizers so that you can have it, as well as the recording of this meeting and the slides. So you have the guidelines or quick reference guide for the roadmap to effective evaluation, and you have the template that Keith talked about. So
We do have one question, Veronica.
great.
Can you please explain what an institutional review board is and why we need to be concerned about them? What can we do? When can we do evaluation without an IRB approval?
Keith, I'll let you start.
Sure. What a great question. So in the case of human subjects research protections, my highest level suggestion would be to engage closely in that conversation with your funder. Whether it's one of the regional medical libraries within the network of the National Library of Medicine, or it's the CDC or the NIH. Talk with your funder about expectations around institutional review board or human subjects research protections oversight. Often requiring IRB oversight certainly is a best practice, generally speaking, but in some instances may be required by the particular funder. And of course, the purpose of engaging with the institutional review board is to ensure that if the work that you're doing is truly considered research and that it's intended to contribute to generalizable knowledge in a systematic way, that the institutional review board is involved in understanding the research, understanding the risks, but also the benefits, so that human participants in research are appropriately protected and cared for in research. Oftentimes, a lot of the evaluation that we're talking about today may not be human subjects research, and that it falls outside of the technical definition of research. And that's why I would emphasize it's really important to work closely with your funder to understand any requirements or expectations. Hopefully that was helpful. Great question.
The next question I see is, do we need to include an evaluation plan in every NNLM grant proposal?
That is a fantastic question. That may, in truth, vary by region to region in terms of the expectations as to whether or not a full plan, including, for example, a logic model, is required. With that said, even if a full evaluation plan is not technically required, I return to this idea of an evaluation plan as a roadmap. It's intended to support you and guide you throughout the entire evaluation process, really establishing that foundation, to mix my metaphors a little bit. And even if a full evaluation plan isn't required, I would essentially guarantee you that the content of the evaluation plan could be copied and pasted, elements thereof, into an application to meet the specific needs for the particular funding mechanism that you're applying for. There's tremendous overlap in terms of what we've covered as a component of an evaluation plan and what an application would typically ask for.
Where can we find the quick reference guide and template?
So we will definitely be sharing it with the organizers, Tony. So I don't know where you're going to be posting the recordings and the slides, but wherever you'll have the like a package of this presentation and this session, you'll have it there. And I don't know, Keith, if you can share the NEC slide, the last one. You can always also we'll be able to find it in our public outputs. We have a community, so feel free. If you do not find it, you will get it from the organizers. We'll post it wherever the session is. But you can also have our email, and our email is nec@northwestern.edu. Send us an email if you don't find it, though it will be with the rest of the session's materials.
So we'll have it uploaded both on the class instance page located on nnlm.gov, and then I will be more than happy to upload it on vfairs.com as well. So they'll be available in multiple locations for you.
Thank you.
And that goes as well with the slides of this presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
Everything.
So once that answers the other question that I see in this presentation. So I think that's about it in terms of time. But thank you so much, Veronica and Keith, for your presentation. I think our attendees learned quite a lot as well. So please join us at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time for our next presentation, Telehealth Services and Social Innovation Through Public Libraries, presented by Alta Porterfield. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again shortly. And thank you again, Keith and Veronica. It was a great presentation.
Right.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.